Welcome in, everybody, to a Football Friday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports, your number one Philadelphia Eagles show, broadcasting live on the weekdays from 8 to 10 a.m. I'm your host, Zander Krause. That's my co-host, John McMullen. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Football Friday, brother?
Yeah, some big storms. Hope everybody's okay locally. A lot of stuff blowing through overnight. So that's number one. But yeah, we're closer to the NFL draft. Today's big Colorado Pro Day. So that's a big one. Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter. But it's draft time. It's creeping up. It's creeping up on us.
About 3 weeks from yesterday is round one, so 20 days now, and 3 weeks from today will be the day two, which will be round 2 and 3. So it is creeping up. I can't believe it's already here. It's amazing, John, what going to the Super Bowl does to the offseason. It completely flips it on its head a little bit in terms of our job. I mean, I think what the Eagles do and just the timeline of it all. You know, I said that yesterday. I'm like, it's already April. It's already the draft. I mean, I can't believe how quick it's moving. But 20 days out, man, from the NFL draft, it's moving right along.
Yeah, and that's a positive in some ways and negative in others. Obviously, the Eagles have a big staff, so they're working on all these things concurrently. But there's no doubt it's one of the reasons why it's so difficult to repeat and why it's so impressive when somebody's able to do it, like Kansas City was, and going for the three-peat. That's why it was such a big deal. To go through that, the Patriots did it for many years, and I remember when the Eagles won the first one in 2017. All of a sudden, you saw this new normal signage in the building. Doug Peterson kind of coined that frame, and it's difficult. It's difficult to be on top of the hill, defend it in some ways, because you are behind every off season. People are trying to take things from you because they're envious of the success, whether it's coaches, players, etc., executives sometimes. So all of that factors in, and the time crunch is big as well, because it while you do have your scouts working ahead and all that kind of stuff, when your main decision maker is focused on the Super Bowl and main decision makers are focused on the Super Bowl, they're not focused on other stuff that other people are focused on. Just common sense.
No doubt about it. Good stuff, Johnny Mac. John, got plenty of topics to get into on this Football Friday. As we mentioned, draft's 20 days out, so we'll talk a little NFL draft. It's time to really start ramping up there, and the focus is on there. I don't think just here on Birds 365, but across the NFL world and inside that Philadelphia Eagles organization as well. I do want to welcome and thank everybody for being here on this Football Friday. Another great week in the books after this show. We hit that show number 1,000 on Wednesday. So thank you to all of you guys for all of the support. We got some great topics here today to discuss on the show, and I'll take some super chats as well. So if you're listening, and even if you just drop a couple of bucks or $1 or $2 or whatever it is, we will take some of your off-season comments, some of your questions for Johnny Mac as well. So appreciate that. A-Team, I'll start off with you, brother. We'll start off with the super because he dropped in $10. Thank you, A-Team. He says, morning Z and J Mac, happy Friday. This offseason is going so damn fast. Before we know it, it'll be training camp again. I know it's early, but what under the radar teams do you see being good in 2025? It's a great question. I think there is a couple of good ones out there. John, any names come to mind right now for you? Again, as Jason said, I know it's a little early, but there does look like there's as you always say, John, a lot changes in a year in the NFL. Any big changes you see that or foresee that are coming this year?
Well, we haven't even hit the draft. You see how important the draft was for the Eagles last year. I mean, hitting on Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean right off the bat. One was second defensive rookie of the year voting. One was fourth. PFF had Cooper as the top rated cornerback in all of football, arguably the best slot cornerback in all of football. Who knows who they're going to get in the draft? It's probably not going to replicate that, and that relates to everybody else as well. So way too early in the process. I brought up that season where you get A.J. Brown on draft night. You get James Bradbury in June. You get C.J. Gardner-Johnson in August. Now, again, that's probably not going to happen, but So we're leaning on a lot of last year and things started to happen. One team that was a little, thought was overblown coming in, and I've changed my mind a little bit on is the Los Angeles Rams, and mainly because of what people like Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata told me. And when they talk, I tend to listen. And they said that front is pretty difficult to deal with from a pass rushing standpoint. And, they're great in short yardage, as we mentioned yesterday. Well, talking about a subject I no longer want to talk about. They're great at a lot of things. They have a very savvy veteran quarterback. They work things out with him. What he was in his height in Detroit? No, ironically, when people thought he stunk. But he's still a very good player. He knows how to play. They have a very good coach, even though I think he's a little bit overblown, but he's still a very good coach.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a team that I think is very good. Washington is a team that's very talented. You look at the NFC North. I'm not as high on them coming off what went on, not only because of the losses, and those are devastating after you have those types of seasons for the two teams at top, but in the case of Detroit, they lost both of their coordinators. In the case of Minnesota, they don't have a quarterback. I don't know anything. I don't know anything about JJ McCarthy. He's never taken an NFL snap, and you're giving him that roster. In a lot of ways, I think that's dereliction of duty, because I think
the other side of the house, could that roster, make JJ McCarthy's life that much easier? You know what I mean?
Well, that's their theory, but I don't. He barely played at Michigan.
I know, and even when he did play, he didn't do all that much. He wasn't a super pass happy guy or anything.
So if they brought in Aaron Rodgers, then you start thinking about them. But I can't think about them with JJ McCarthy. Detroit's very talented, and they're going to win a lot of games, but I don't like changing both coordinators. So, you can and obviously the Eagles have taken a big step back from a talent standpoint, in losing the players that they've lost. So, I think everybody has, not that it should be any surprise, but how he called the team incomplete. And that's where everybody is right now. Everybody's got the big I, incomplete. There's no A, B, C, D, E, F. You want to go. They're incomplete. They're all incomplete. But for the teams, best equipped to add and be, Philadelphia's obviously at the top because they still have their core foundational pieces and they're more talented. They came into this process more talented than everybody else, maybe with the exception of Detroit with the coordinators. But they're very talented. Washington, with that quarterback, is going to be a problem. It's going to be a fucking problem for many, many years if he stays healthy. It's not to say won't have a little bit of a step back. I've argued he's probably going to be a better quarterback this year. Most fans won't realize it because the numbers won't be the same. But he's probably going to be learning and probably doing things and processing better. But they're going to be a good team. How good the Rams? Those are the teams that sort of come to fruition right off the top of the head, and there's always somebody that comes out of nowhere as that potential. I don't think San Francisco's having the bounce back. They've had too much attrition.
I agree. I think they're on the other side. I think they're going to have to go through a little bit of a rebuild.
Yeah, that's potentially. We always talk about Green Bay. Can they put everything together? I know they're not the most popular team in Philadelphia.
Where are you on Jordan Love? Because I think he's
a very good player. I think he's a very good player, but I see a lot of not as physically gifted as Josh Allen, but I see a lot of the same things. Like the throws he can make are crazy, but he's a little bit too reckless. And I think if he can figure it out and sort of weigh it, I think, but he's very good. I'm not with some people who want to go down the other route. And then Chicago is interesting.
Yeah, I think they're interesting.
Because the quarterback, even though I don't, there's some red flags to me in the form of body language and things like that. But when you're on a bad team, that stuff tends to manifest it. They rebuilt the offensive line. They now have a coach who's going to take advantage of the quarterback skill set. They're a team to watch because he's got, just from the physical traits, he's off the charts. So that's a team that that's a very good division. I mean, it was last year. It is this year.
Yep, we'll see what kind of turnover we have in the NFL. Jason, appreciate your question. Fly Eagles dropped in $2. Fly Eagles, if you forgot to put a message, you can just comment below your question or whatever it was, and I will get to it. But we appreciate all you guys being here. There was some news in NFL land yesterday, all right? So I do want to get that out of the way here, talk about that in the first order of business. In hour number 2, we will take a bunch of questions as well in there. So if you do have super chats and we don't get to them right now, we will get to them a little bit later on in the show. But, John, couple pieces of business yesterday in Eagle land and NFL land. First off, Dallas Cowboys acquired a new quarterback. All right. They picked up Joe Milton from the Patriots. All right. So they got their new backup for Dak Prescott. I actually like that Joe Milton kid. Vic Fangio spoke. Vic Fangio spoke. I mentioned that yesterday. He talked to John Clark, but he really said the key that we didn't talk about was he'd like to keep Cooper at nickel. So maybe they'll be keeping Cooper DeJean inside that slot corner. And then the first day, or some Eagles news there, is the first day of the Eagles off-season program will be April 21st. I'll have John elaborate on this. OTAs are scheduled for May 27th, 28th, May 30th, June 2nd and 3rd, and June 5th. And then the mandatory minicamp is one day, and it's June 10th. So, John, what does all that mean? Like when it says the first day of the Eagles off-season program will be April 21st, what exactly does that mean?
That's the first day guys can come in and start working on, things like conditioning and strength and all that kind of stuff. And rehab and things like that. So basically there's 3 phases of off-season work: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And phase 1 is 2 weeks, and it's you can have meetings, strength and condition, as I mentioned, and rehab pretty much only. That's all you can do. Can't do any on-field stuff.
Okay.
You'll see clips of guys throwing it. It means organized, basically, on-field stuff. Phase 2 then consists of 3 weeks, which is you can start on-field workouts. You can do group instruction and drills, what they call perfect play drills, which is, nonsense. With offensive players and defensive players with defensive players. You can't have offense versus defense. It's all a walkthrough pace. No live there's never any live contact unless you're the Baltimore Ravens and get fined, but I digress. But you're not supposed to have any live contact. And then phase 3 is the most important part and the most interesting for fans, because those are the OTAs. You can have as many as 10. The Eagles never used 10. I forget there were like 6 this year. You can run 7-on-7, 9-on-7, 11-on-11. No live contact, obviously. No pads, nothing like that. But more of a team-oriented aspect. That's why it's more important. And then you can have mandatory work, the mini camp, which is long. It can be 3 days. The Eagles are doing 1 day. And then there's also lesser known as there's a rookie developmental program. So you can bring in the rookies for 7 weeks after the draft. Obviously, that begins in May. And you can have the post-draft rookie minicamp, which they always have. So that's always interesting. But and that's a little bit off to the side. But yeah, I mean, Jody and I used to talk a lot about, because Jody's an old school guy, and I'm an old school guy. I mean, but, it is what it is when it comes to these practices. And the Eagles never seemingly use all their available days. And, I mean, at this point, I don't see how anybody can criticize how they do it.
No, you can't. It's impossible.
People do. It's a story every year, but.
Yeah, it's got to be going away. I mean, especially with this success. I mean, and the health, everything that's happened in the last couple of years for this team. I mean, Come on. It's one of those things, John. We've said this before in the offseason. At what point are opinions overrated? I mean, you know what I mean? At what point does the resume and does the results speak for themselves? I think we're in a case of
and
that.
nobody's winning because they're using all their 10 OTAs and
No,
the
but it puts
spring.
your, as you always say, John, it improves your margin. If you do things right, enough things right, little things right, it adds up.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's where people get upset by it. They say, well, if you got 10, why not use 10? If you got 3 minicamp days, why not use 3? And the Eagles have gone in a different direction and placed more focus on, the strength and conditioning, the meetings aspect. And it's hard to argue with their success. I mean, you're not winning football games by practicing in the spring, and I think everybody knows that. But if you talk to a coach, they always want to be out there.
Yeah.
But
I think Nick has been ahead of the curve on that in terms of
he wants to practice too. But
I know he does, but he's obviously taken a back seat, I think, to the results. Maybe what I mean. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe.
Well, I think I always say I've never met a football coach that doesn't want to practice. Never.
Yeah, but I do think Nick has that respect for like you mentioned the other day. I don't know if we were talking about Chip Kelly, and you're like, you can't have 33-year-old dudes out there, on whatever the case was. And there was no respect or no understanding of certain situations or certain players on the team. I think Nick does a pretty good job at that. I think he, has a good gauge, a good understanding.
Yeah, he's got a much more, and that's why, he's good for his job. And I always say, everybody's focusing on play calling. His job is so big. It's so enormous. And this is stuff that nobody ever talks about, that you have to manipulate. You have to make everybody happy, and you got to make the medical people happy. You got to make the sports science people happy. You got to not make them happy, but, make them feel like they're wanted and worthy and all that kind of stuff. And if they have good ideas, maybe as a pure football coach, you want to just be out there. But, when things are working, you generally don't fix them. And then there's little tweaks. When Vic came in, and Vic, trust me, Vic wants to practice. They practiced a little bit more last year, coming off a bad season. I put that in quotations. And that's sort of the way it goes. But now they won the Super Bowl. And plus they had the long season and the short off season, and they've scaled back a little bit. So, it makes some sense when you think about it.
Yep, no doubt. A couple other things happened yesterday in NFL land that we will talk about. I do want to get your take on the Joe Milton trade to the Cowboys. But the tight end market got reset yesterday. All right. So the Arizona Cardinals give Trey McBride a massive contract. And the reason this is notable at this point is because Dallas Goedert's deal or situation is lingering here in Philly. So Pro Bowl tight end Trey McBride is now the highest paid tight end in NFL history with a 4-year, $76 million.
That's how, real quick, that's how contracts work, people. Doesn't mean Trey's the best, but he's up.
Right. But deal includes $43 million guaranteed and a $19 million average per year, the highest ever for any NFL tight end. As John mentioned, that's how deals work. But John, this is notable because if you're Dallas Goedert and you're like, yo, I think I'm better than Trey McBride. I might not have had better numbers, but I think I'm better. I'm not taking a damn pay cut. He got paid $19 million a year. What does this mean for Dallas Goedert and the Eagles in that tight end situation?
Yeah, I don't think it changes much from the standpoint of, like, he's not in a position of his career, even though he's a better player, and he is a better player. And Trey McBride is very good. Don't get me wrong. He's a very good player. I think one of the more underrated players in the NFL, but Dallas is still better. So, George Kittle's still better. I don't know if Kelsey is. He had like 100 and something catches. Didn't score a lot of touchdowns, but very good player. Trey McBride doesn't surprise me at all. He set the new standard, but he's like 25. That's why he's in that position. Like, right. If he's 30, he's not in that position. That's where Dallas is. It's not fair.
Yeah, and I'm not saying Dallas is going to get 19, but don't you think Dallas would say, all right, at least give me 14,
Yeah, well, he set the, from that, I can't what makes it tricky is Dallas is out of guaranteed money. So typically he's under contract. For those who don't know, he technically the Eagles could just let him play out his existing contract, and he's going to get paid about $15 million under that case. The Eagles don't want that. Both sides don't want that. The Eagles don't want it because of the cap number. His cap number's over 11, somewhere 11, 12, somewhere in that range. It's like fifth highest on the team. They don't want it that high. And Goedert wants, typically in this situation, if you want to move forward, what happens is you guarantee his entire contract for this season, and then you add some more money. That's what they did with Slay.
Right.
That's typically what you want to do if you want to move forward. In this particular instance, I don't think the Eagles want to move forward. So we've been talking about it, and even though Howie said there is no update at the meetings, if you notice, because Howie spoke about it, Jeffrey spoke about it,
nope.
Nick spoke about it, they all had the same messaging. And Jeffrey sort of, because he's not used to doing this stuff about personnel, he kind of gave away the hint. His answer, at least to me, was he basically lumped him in with, I believe it was CJ and Milton.
Yes, exactly what he did.
And those guys are gone.
That's what, I'm happy you had that take, because I heard that and I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah. So that's exactly how I took it. And Howie and pretty much Nick did it more politically, but they say they were on the same page. So, yeah, I don't think he's going to be back. Now, what that looks like, they want a 4th round pick. I've gotten that from multiple sources. I don't know if they're going to get that. If they do get it, it's going to be a future pick. And by that, I mean 2026, 2027. Yeah, he'll go as far as he needs to go, because Howie thinks that's a very market inefficiency is what he would call it, where people around the league don't value future draft picks as much as current draft picks, even though it makes no sense. But it does to other people, because they're probably not going to be taking those picks unless they hit on picks right now. That's the reason it exists in other cities, and it doesn't exist in Philadelphia. So Howie takes advantage of that market inefficiency all the time. And I think ultimately he'll do it now. It'd be easier from a cap standpoint to trade him after June 1st. But again, teams are making their plans. And the teams that were interested early in tight ends have gotten other tight ends. So at some point, if he is back, he's probably back playing under his last year of his contract as a lame duck. And I'm not sure the Eagles want that. But Howie's stubborn, man. Look, they didn't want to bring Zach Ertz back, but they brought him back. They didn't want to bring James Bradbury back, but they brought him back.
Right.
He's going to be stubborn. That's his history.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. And I want to pose this to you, all right? And when I say this, I don't mean this as a knock on the player. I more mean as this is the Philadelphia Eagles, and that's the team we're analyzing. And based on what they did and where they've been successful and what their offense does, is this not that big of a deal? I mean, hear me out. Dallas Goedert had 496 yards last year. 175 of them came in one game, if I'm not mistaken. He started 10 games. They were the best running team in the NFL. As we talked about all year long, John, this isn't a prolific passing team. Now, Goedert does more than just pass catch, but maybe they look at this and they're like, yeah, I mean, what do you want to do? You want to pay $15 million to another pass catcher? I don't think we need to do it. Is it overblown?
And that's
Dallas Goedert.
I don't think it's overblown from the standpoint of he's a good player. Like,
yeah, I know that, but I mean for Philly, right? I mean, like for this team.
Well, I think one of the things I get a kick out of is, when Dallas was out, everybody I've seen people trying to push the narrative. Well, the Eagles did it's just as well without him. They were 16-1. They won without Jordan Mailata. Nobody's saying Fred Johnson was out.
Yeah, right.
I mean, so to your point, can they sure, if they have the same level of success in the running game, but when they needed the passing game in the postseason, he sure showed up, man.
He was big,
People
man.
are talking about, Jalen showing up and see he can do it. Well, Dallas showed up.
Yes, he did. There's no doubt about that.
And he was a big part of that. He had more receptions than anybody else on the team. And Jalen trusts him and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to project next year and say they have the same running game, which is unlikely, but even if you want to project that, and then you're in the playoffs and somebody stops you, and then instead of Dallas Goedert, you got to go with our buddy who loves Harrison Bryant, or you got to go with Frank Calcaterra, or you got to go with Kylan Granson. I think you'll see the difference.
And then Jeffrey Lurie might be singing a different tune because he was, he brought up a good point. Well, when we needed the pass, we were still able to do it, and I think, if you're not able to do that, what does that look like? But no, it is interesting, with Dallas Goedert. The other thing is he misses a lot of games. I mean, I know you hate when people call him glass, but he does miss a lot of games.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll go off on one of my the glass people. Then they worry about safety. Then they call some. Oh, she made a glass. You're fucking morons. I got an F.
But 10 games played, John. So he does miss a lot of games.
No, that is a legitimate criticism. What isn't a legitimate criticism? He's not a tough player. But part of the reason he gets hurt is because he plays too recklessly.
Yeah,
use that term again. People loved it when he carried that Packers and would stiff arm after stiff arm. He also broke his arm at one point doing that stiff arm. He's won Kyle Brandt's angry runs. I've talked to him about this. The Eagles have talked to him about this. He's verbalized he needs to stop that stuff as he gets older, but he can't stop it. And it's great when it works. And then there's other injuries. Hurt his hamstring last year. You pull your hamstring, That's one of those things. But I guess maybe it could have stretched more. I don't know. His broken glenoid bone in his shoulder.
Yeah, right. A little bit of a
get dumped on your shoulder. You get dumped on your shoulder. You break a bone. But he's a very physical player. That's the part I push back on.
Yeah, well, he certainly is, and he's great at being physical. John, is it fair to do this? Okay. Based on where this team is, based on the contract situation that's coming up, based on some of the changes they've made because of that contract situation coming up, as the owner and the general manager talked about recently, is it fair to liken Goedert to the offensive version of CJ Gardner-Johnson? Not in terms of a player, but in terms of we know he's good.
Oh, yeah.
We got to draw the line in the sand on who we're going to pay and who we're not. And maybe they look at Goedert and say, we know he's great. We're not saying he wasn't valuable to us, but he's not above that pendulum, okay? And we can only pay so many people right now. The offense didn't really go through him last year. It did in the playoffs a little bit, but is it fair to liken him to that perspective of?
Yeah, I think they're all. I mentioned that. They've drawn a line. Milton's under it. Josh is under it. CJ's under it. I'm pretty sure Dallas is under it.
Do you agree with all those people who are under it?
Yes and no. And by that I mean, boy, I don't like going away from their foundational philosophy. And by that I mean offensive, defensive line. I never like going away from that. I don't like it. I think it's a mistake long term. But unique year. The first two, they only had 2 first-team All-Pros. One was a running back, one was a linebacker, all-ball linebacker. They've never had a running back to the level that they had. They've never had an all-ball linebacker, at least in the modern era, like they've had now last year. So they're unique. But, I always say you get good players, you pay the good players. Well, they got a bunch of good players. Arguably, again, the rich people problems.
Yeah.
They can't pay everybody, and now they're giving away or they're allowing good players to leave. Now, the easiest way, and how we talked about the extensions and when he feels like you're going through a potential Super Bowl year, he doesn't like to give out early extensions. because it could create, why not me? If you're giving an extension to Milton, maybe somebody says, why not me? And from Milton's standpoint, I don't think he was signing because he knew that if he got the opportunity to play, that he felt in his mind that he was going to prove that he could play, and at the bottom of that rainbow was going to be a whole boatload of money. So he wasn't signing for 3 years, $8 million a year, which looks like a big raise. He wasn't going to do that. So it takes two parts of the equation. So I understand why they moved on from Milton Williams and Josh Sweat, because one got 26 million, one got 19 million. I get it, but I don't like it. I don't like it.
I mean, even with the approach of sticking to what this organization does on the defensive line in the trenches, I don't know if paying Milton would have made sense here, man.
I know from that standpoint, but I guarantee we're going to be talking on this show about the offensive line not being quite as good and the defensive line not being quite as good. Defensive line more notably than the offensive line, because you only lost one guy on the offensive line. But even that, and that's lesser money.
Yeah, I mean, I'll use your thing though against you on the offensive line. I mean, we've talked about this offensive line last year as one of the greatest of all time. Like, of course, regression, John, regression to the mean, as you always say.
Yeah.
They're not going to be as good as last year. That's why I thought that Lurie answer on the one thing with the 2024 team being one of the best was kind of a genius answer, because they're like, hey, are you not as good as last year? And he's like, man, no, we're not. But that was one of the best NFL teams of all time. It's going to be hard to be better than them.
Yeah, and I agree. I agree with that. I agree with that. And even if they brought everybody back, but I don't like giving up good offensive linemen or good defensive linemen. That's basically what it comes down to. And I do think people look at, but the Eagles know better than most people that this is where the salary cap is going. It's keep going up and up and up. And a couple of years from now, 19 million for it already 19 million for an edge rusher is cheap for a veteran edge rusher. 26 is not cheap, certainly, but it's not going to look as daunting.
Yeah, and once Jalen Carter is making 38, whatever it is.
So just from that philosophy, I don't like giving up good, but I also understand Milton wasn't signing. He wasn't. So they couldn't have gotten it done early.
Right. So if Milton Williams would have signed early, do you think he'd be here?
Oh, yeah. Well, he'd be probably pissed off. And that's another thing. It's easy to say, oh, sign him to the cost-effective deals. And when both sides are aligned and it works, fine. But if he signed for what the Eagles wanted him to sign for, which is probably a little bit more, and probably 12, 13, which people would have said, wow, that's a big deal. No, it isn't, as you've seen, and I don't think he'd be happy. So it's always a catch-22. But from just the standpoint, and I think the contract stuff obviously complicates things, but just from a pure football perspective, I hate giving up good defensive linemen.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. No doubt. Going back to Goedert, though, Johnny Mac, I'm going to ask you to what do you think is going to happen here, and when do you think it's going to happen? I know it's probably going to be post-June 1 because there's just no world that makes sense for this team to move on from them before then, which would rule out, I've seen some people, in the chat go like, oh, take Goedert and a pick and move up or something like that. They're not going to trade him for the draft this year. So anything you acquire for Goedert would be future NFL drafts. How do you see this playing out with Dallas Goedert?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be after June 1st, but like I said, he's proven Zach Ertz at the same position. He took him into the season, traded him near the trade deadline. It could go that far. Maybe you should hope for that. I think, things get elevated if they get a big time tight end, and by a big time tight end, I don't mean Tyler Warren or Loveland from Michigan. I mean, one of the Mason Taylor types, the second tier types.
Yeah.
The kid from Miami, Arroyo. They get that guy in the draft, I think it speeds things up. if they don't get that guy in the draft, I think Howie's very comfortable waiting to get what he wants. And ultimately, that'll be probably a future 4th-round pick.
Yeah.
And that might go all the way into the season. Because, again,
which is bad news for Goddard, by the way, because Howie's stubborn, man. So you're under contract in Philly. You're not going to get your way that easy.
Well, he's going to get his, $15 million or whatever. But
maybe. Look what happened to Bradbury.
Well,
Howie was so stubborn on that. He said, put him on the bench for a whole year. Fuck it.
No, I mean, he's owed $15 million this year. So he's getting that.
Okay. How much of it's guaranteed though? Like, how does that work when none
of it's guaranteed? That's the problem. But the minute you're on the 53, it's guaranteed as a vested veteran.
Okay.
So it becomes guaranteed.
Yeah, see, that part of the contract confuses me, where it's like he's got no guaranteed money left. How does that mean he makes money this year? You know what I mean? Some of that stuff confuses me with the contracts.
Oh yeah, he's going to make money, but when you're in that position, when you're a good player in that position and your guaranteed money is all out, is off, that's when it's a signal. All right, something's got to be done from a contract standpoint. And it happens all over the league. It's not just an Eagles thing. And that's where you come to, if you're still at the height and they still want you, that's where the extension talk comes in and you extend them. In this instance, he's below that demarcation line. It's pretty clear, pretty evident. And the Eagles aren't going to go and extend him to the point that he wants. And from Dallas, you have to understand, from Dallas's perspective, he's 30, and the rest of the league thinks the same way the Eagles do. 30 is a dirty word in the NFL, but he's still a very good player. And this is his last opportunity to get significant guaranteed money. And that's what players want. They want guaranteed money. Agents, when they leak it to Schefter or whoever, they play up all the numbers and all the nonsense, like you saw it with Trey McBride.
Yeah.
The average annual value, the most important number to players is the guaranteed money. And after that, the upfront money.
Yeah.
What you're getting right away.
We'll see what happens with Dallas Goedert here in Philly. I'm going to predict he is gone. All right, John, a couple other things I want to hit on, and we'll get to our first commercial break. And then when we come back from the break, we got some great topics, and we'll also take some of the comments from the great viewers here on JAKIB Sports. All right, so, John, I want to get your thoughts on what Fangio said about Cooper DeJean. I'll give you the quote. I really like him as the nickel. I'd like to see him stay at nickel. He plays it very well. He's got good size in there. I think he enjoys playing in that position. There you go. There's Vic Fangio, all right? And his opinion is more important than mine or anybody else's when it comes to where Cooper DeJean should play in the future. But sounds like Vic likes Coop at the nickel, Johnny Mac.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about this yesterday at Sports. I mean, we already knew this, that they were keeping him in the nickel. Now, because they penciled in Kaylee Ringo as the starter outside, and they've signed Adoree Jackson to be the insurance policy and push him to replace Darius Slay. Now, where Vic will say, what he's saying is, all right, well, if these guys shit the bed, I might have to move him outside, but he doesn't want to. So that, I think, is what Vic was trying to allude to. But everybody's on board that this year, the plan is to keep him inside. Long term, contracts come into it. Outside corners make more than inside corners. The Eagles could just say, he's so good, we're going to pay him and solve it that way. But that's for down the road. This is only his second season. He was the best slot cornerback in football last year, which is crazy as a rookie. PFF will tell you he's the best cornerback, period, in football, which is crazy as a rookie. And he can play outside. And I've mentioned that pretty consistently because I've talked to the scouting staff about they scouted him as an outside corner. They drafted him as an outside corner. And all I mean by bringing that up is they believe he can play outside corner. Like, they're not concerned about that. But for the time being, if Kelly Ringo is the key to all of this. and to a lesser extent, Adoree Jackson if he fails. As long as you have that outside corner, he's staying inside. But if you're so poor there, they might have to do it. And I don't think that's going to happen.
We'll see what ends up happening with all that stuff. Johnny Mac, I'll I'll save the super chat for a little bit later on. Abe, appreciate you dropping that in there. But I do want to talk about last thing I wanted to get you to discuss from the NFL news perspective was the Joe Milton trade to the Cowboys, Johnny Mac. I actually like him, Joe Milton. I think he's a good pickup. But your thoughts on that move?
My first thought is, boy, Trey Lance might stink on ice, man.
He is, man.
I mean, nobody wants to sign that guy. Boy, that is one of the worst draft picks of all time, evidently. But.
And they sent 3 firsts to trade for him, and it didn't bite him in the butt early. But I think that's what's bitten them in the butt right now. We talk about a team that's in regression, team that doesn't have the guys needed, the young guys. Well, they could have had 3 first-round draft picks that they selected. That might be bolstering that roster a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Milton showed a little bit with an opportunity to play with a very bad team late in the season. Had a nice little game against Buffalo. And, teams will blow that out of proportion. Obviously, he's gifted physically. He's huge. 6'5"-ish, 250-ish. So he's got all the physical skills. I don't think it's a bad move as a backup quarterback, other than I'd like experience at the backup quarterback position.
Well, the Eagles don't have that,
but it's kind of, and I don't like it. I said that. Now there's 2 ways. I'm thinking of it. You need a guy to play a game or 2. Then I want the veteran. Now, if the catastrophe happens and somebody tears their ACL, then I don't mind going with the guy with the ceiling, and you have time. You're going to have some hiccups and things like that. But if somebody sprains their ankle and you need to go in, you saw it last year with Kenny and, Kellen raving about the operation, and I want a guy who can run the offense. And people say that's the only game the Eagles lost, the game in Washington, but they did a hell of a job in that game, losing Jalen Hurts 6 minutes in. They scored a shitload of points. They were ahead with 6 seconds left in the game.
Yep.
They played well in that game for people that just look at the scoreboard and say they lost. And that to me is what you want from your backup quarterback. To be go in those short windows and keep you competitive and things like that. However, if he's out for the season like he was last year, and you got to play a significant period of time, I probably take a shot on this kid over Cooper Rush. So it sort of depends on where you are and if he's got to play a week or 2, or if he's got to play 16 games, there's differences. But I think he's better than Cooper Rush if he's got to play a lot of games. And I think he's worse if he's got to play a short few games, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do think they're more equipped if Dak goes down again. I think they're going to be better than they were last year. So we'll see what happens with Dallas. We'll get to our first commercial break. When we come back, we got some great topics on the other side. That Sirianni contract is looming. I'm going to ask Johnny Mac about that. We'll talk about that. We'll talk a little bit about Jordan Davis, and we will take some chats from the comments from the chat and some of your guys' super chats. Abe checked in and said, "You're Mount Rushmore of all-time NFL players." We're not going to answer that yet, Abe, but I like that. I'll give you mine from 2000, Abe, because I can't give you ones that.
Well, I think they're different sports. I think you almost have to go different. You have to go old.
Well, I'll get you to give me a couple on the different eras, Johnny Mac. So we'll do that after the break. Appreciate everybody for being here this morning on Birds 365. By the way, it's Abe's birthday. Big happy birthday to you, Abe, one of our best viewers here on JAKIB Sports. Abe, I love you, brother. Appreciate you, man, for everything you do for the channel. So happy birthday to you. I hope you have a great day. Again, and welcome and thank everybody for being here. Don't forget to hit the like button. We've been slacking on the like button. All right, so hit that like button for us if you want to help us grow. We appreciate that. We'll be right back in 3 minutes on Birds 365.
The following is a real testimonial from the father of a young injured